Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Coffee with Craig. It is Halloween. Ooh. Yeah, Halloween. It is October 31st, the day in which, people celebrate, children coming in costumes, knocking at your door and begging for candy. Have fun with that. Anyway, so today on Halloween, I guess what I wanted to talk about was, one of the things that has always been kind of an oddity to me is the fascination that Democrats, in particular anti-gun Democrats, seem to have with firearms, and really making firearms the boogeyman of all that they deem to be evil and bad in this world. Obviously, it all has to do with, well, first of all, Republicans, but then secondly, guns. And so one of the things that was interesting is after the Las Vegas shooting, taking a look at how Republicans and Democrats responded in terms of their discussions relating to firearms, or just in regard, not just firearms, but in regards to the shooting in general. Pew Research did a study, or at least I don't know if you want to call it a study, but what they did was they went back and they looked at all of the Republicans and Democrat congressional members who had Facebook pages, and what were they talking about following the shooting? How did they couch the shooting? And what did that, how exactly did that manifest in their discussions on their social media, especially when it came to discussing firearms policy? And the interesting thing that they noted was that, well, first of all, Democrats were much more likely to mention, or at least they were more likely to mention the shooting that took place as a shooting. They talked about it. They kept saying the shooting, as opposed to Republicans, who were more likely to point out the events of last night, the tragedy of last night, things that occurred. They were looking at what they were more kind of just talking about the fact that this was a very bad thing that happened, and Democrats more focused on the fact that it was a shooting. They also were much more likely, significantly more likely, to talk about guns. In fact, what was noted was that, first of all, there were 382 total mentions amongst Democrats, whereas only about 213 mentions by Republicans. In terms of, once again, in the week following the events in Las Vegas. But what they noticed was 177 out of those 382 specifically mentioned firearms, specifically mentioned guns. 205 of those 382 did not mention firearms. I think that's important to note because, as we've often said, Democrats tend to operate from the Rahm Emanuel school of communications and policy. Never let a good tragedy go to waste. And so they wasted absolutely no time jumping on a public policy agenda that, first of all, had nothing to do with the shooting, but had more to do with guns and finding reasons and ways to ban guns. Now, part of that manifests itself, I think, in kind of the idea of, the dog whistles that Democrats look for. And in many cases, the reason why they mentioned guns was because they realized that if they mentioned guns in their posts, they were much more likely to get people, at least their people, people who follow them, to like their post, and also more likely to get them to comment on their posts. Now, I don't know that they broke down necessarily the comments in regards to good and bad, like for those who supported the comments and those who didn't, because I do also believe that some of those comments, a significant number of those comments, probably were also people who, they were probably people who didn't like what the Democrat had to say or the gun banner had to say on the particular topic. So I would venture to say, at least I feel pretty confident, that probably a lot of those comments were, were not very positive. Were not very positive comments for the particular member. Having said all that, but they realized that they got much more response. And keep in mind, Democrats are more about how people feel than about what they actually do or what the policy does. How does my policy, how does my communications make people feel? That's what they're more concerned about. But so they realized that they were able to get much more response from that. But the other thing, and this is I think the more insidious part, because see, in the conversations, Democrats were much more likely to blame the gun, and Republicans were much more likely to blame the shooter or the perpetrator of the crime, however you want to couch them. But I think that goes back to, once again, a fundamental idea and difference between, I think, those on the right and those on the left, or at least those on the left and the rest of us, those on the far left and the rest of us, is that we don't go around blaming inanimate objects for the evil that people do. For some reason, they seem to be set on this idea and this notion that, well, hey, you know what? If we just take away the stuff, then the people will stop doing it. Right? They just seem to think that you can legislate or litigate or whatever you want to call it. They seem to think that you can remove evil from someone's heart. Hey, you know what? If we just, I don't know, if we just got rid of guns, if we could find a way to get rid of guns or at least make them illegal, because they're not, they know they can't get rid of them, but if they could make them illegal, well, then people will stop doing bad things with guns or stop doing bad things, period. But that doesn't work out. It just flat out doesn't work out. It also was important to note that Republicans focused more on the people, not the object, not the guns. Republicans were more likely to point out, talk about the first responders, those who bravely sacrificed and put themselves on the line in order to defend and protect and serve the people that were there that were there in the crowd. Democrats hardly ever mentioned them. Why? Because it didn't fit their agenda. It didn't fit their public policy agenda, which was, in the end, to ban guns. Because that's what their goal is. They want to ban guns. Why talk about anything that takes away from your idea, the plan to ban guns? I don't get it. I don't get why they think that inanimate objects in and of themselves cause and do evil. But I think that this study kind of points to it, is that they're looking for opportunities to promote an already put together, already narrated agenda. And I think it's important for us to, once again, if we are going to talk about stuff like this, we need to talk about how do we address the issue of violence. And let me tell you something. For those of you who do not realize this, violence is a people issue. It's not a thing issue, right? If someone wants to commit violence, you take away their gun, they're going to have a knife. You take away their knife, they're going to have a bat. You take away their bat, they're going to have a car. People who want to commit violence upon somebody else are going to find a way to do it. If you want to talk about it, if you want to address that issue, let's talk about how we address, how we deal with people who commit or desire to commit crimes like this. And I'll tell you right now, the number one way in which you do it is, one, yes, I see you, Brandon, you talk about part of it is a mental health issue. The other part of it is, quite frankly, is, we seem to not want to deal with people who, we don't seem to want to deal with consequences. We seem, at least in places, at least amongst liberals seem to want to let criminals, they want to say that criminals are victims, right? They want to say the law-abiding people who want to defend themselves from criminals, well, you're the ones that are really perpetrating the crimes by your desire to defend yourselves against this poor victim who just wants to mug you or rape you or steal your property. So the fact that you want to defend yourselves against them, well, that makes you in and of yourself a criminal, and therefore you need to be punished. Anyway, just my 2 cents. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. Let's see what some of our folks have to say here. Patrick says, ban cars, alcohol, drugs, bats, books, video games. Hell, let's all just lock ourselves in padded cells. Look, no more violence. Patrick, you sounded a bit sarcastic there. I get what you're saying, my friend. I definitely get what you're saying. At a certain point, you have to realize that you will never legislate evil out of men or women's, or out of people's hearts. And so at a certain point, you just have to let them know that there are consequences for their evil deeds or acts, and you have to hold them to those consequences. And unfortunately, that's going to be done. That's not being done here in the state of California, as we are saying, we're going to remove consequences from the commission of crimes. Anyway. John says, laws only work for the law-abiding. Yes, they only work for the law-abiding, but that also goes back once again, John, to consequences. See, if you have a law and someone breaks it, there should be consequences. And see, when you have those consequences and you enforce those consequences, at least for the people for whom consequences matter, well, they're going to hopefully then make better choices or different choices. Hopefully. But when you have no consequences, a child reaches up and touches a hot stove. They burn their hand. That's a consequence of touching the hot stove. Guess what? They won't touch a hot stove again. I mean, it just seems simple, but in today's world, we don't even want to allow those consequences to happen. There's a local radio talk show host here. I love it. He says, stupid should hurt. Evil should hurt. If you do something that is inherent, that harms other individuals in society, you should have to pay a consequence. That consequence should hurt. If for no other reason than to encourage that individual not to try it again, or to encourage other people not to try it again, or not to try it in the first place. Let's see. Rafi says, any changes for the new ammo regulations in 2018? Rafi, we're waiting on them just like you are. And I will tell you right now, as soon as those new regs come out, you will hear from us. So make sure you stay tuned in right here. Make sure you're on our email list, because if you're on our email list, you'll know as soon as we know, because that's the first thing that we do is we send the information out to you guys. So I'd encourage you, Rafi, if you're not on our email list yet, go to firearmspolicy.org. It's right there on the front page. You can go ahead and sign up right there, and you will get all of the email alerts on all of the changing regulations. And so that's the fastest way. It's much faster than waiting till I'm here on coffee to ask me. But yeah, if you go ahead, sign up for that. That'll help you out. Justin says, great work. I just want to make sure, and Justin, I really appreciate you saying that, because it once again reminds me, we have a team of folks here at FPC that work really, really hard. And, I appreciate that I get to be kind of the one who interacts with you guys the most. But we've got some guys, some of the best policy people, some of the best outreach and marketing and grassroots organizers here. We really have some awesome people working here, and we appreciate every single time you guys thank us. It means a lot to us. So thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the support, because none of this happens without you guys. Kevin says, happy Halloween. Happy Halloween to you, and thank you very much. Dems and Libs, this is from Sean. Dems and Libs are trying to turn this country into a version of the Demolition Man movie. Wow. Yeah, they are. And it didn't work out for Demolition Man, did it? Not at all. That, once again, because you can only go so far in trying to, once again, legislate. You can't change what's in people's hearts, at least not through legislation and policy. But we want to focus on trying to tell people what they can do and what they can think and what they can have and what they can control. And what they don't understand is the more you do that to people, the more likely you are to have them go the opposite way. Well, folks, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. I want to thank you guys once again for tuning in. You guys have a fun and safe Halloween. Those of you who are planning on enjoying some spirits tonight, just do me a favor, just one for me. And anyway, but you folks have fun, take care, and stay free.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.